Good afternoon or good evening, I guess. My name is Michael and I am an alcoholic. Uh, had an interesting interaction. My wife has got 14 years recovery, and I was talking to her about, doing this for Lily. And I said, well, cocaine isn't really part of my story. And she says, you've never done cocaine? And I explained to her that, in fact, I had. That, in fact, in the 70s, I had some friends who would get it out of the wing of a plane direct from Miami. But having, I found out later on, having ADHD, I never got the high that people get from cocaine. I just got focused. So it seemed to me something that didn't work for me. But anyway, let me tell you the rest of my story. Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic. I was born in New York City. I was raised by Irish Catholic parents, first generation out of Ireland. My grandmothers lived in an apartment upstairs. We had 48 apartment houses in our building, and 24 were either direct friends or relatives. Kind of a nice little community. Uh, Drinking was something that was love in our family. Grandpa would, you'd sit on his knee and he'd let you drink a little bit of his drink. When you got a little bit older, you could have a small glass of beer with frankfurters and sauerkraut. Uh, so it was something that was not necessarily um, uh, it was part of the life. Again, growing up, I kind of had a lonely childhood. I had ADHD, and I don't know if you guys know how that works, but in my day, it was called BAD, and they beat you. But I guess I was an annoying child because I was smart and I was wanting to be accepted, and I was always trying to uh, use my intelligence that way, and it wasn't really appreciated by the other kids I hung out with. And the interesting thing was I was allowed to play sports with the gang, but as soon as the sports were over, I was not allowed to hang out with them. So it was lonely. I got involved with other things, and then all of a sudden, I turned 15 or 14, and I discovered alcohol. And alcohol made me feel okay. It took that loneliness away. And my first real drunk was St. Patrick's Day. I was 10 days short of my 15th birthday. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with New York City, but I drank a half a pint of Hiram Walker Imperial uh, and fell asleep on 86th Street and woke up on a train station on 14th Street. I called my father and said, I'm drunk. I don't know where I am. He says, get in a cab and come home. Uh, went upstairs, up out of the subway to get in a cab. The first cab driver kicked me out. I went and fell asleep in the park for an hour. The second cab driver took me all the way up to northern Manhattan. An interesting thing happened with that. I never got in trouble. My father was not a man who spared the rod, but he never hit me from that day on. I've never figured that out, and someday when I get to heaven and talk to him, I'll ask him about that. As a matter of fact, 3 hours later, they woke me up and asked me if I wanted to go make money babysitting for my cousins. My drinking in high school was intermittent. I wouldn't say I had a drinking problem in high school. The nice thing about it was that I always was able to get booze. So I became popular in the neighborhood because I was always able to finagle some booze some way or another. We moved out of the city when I was 17. We moved up to a tiny little suburb, and we had more. Anyway, it was tiny little thing. But I went from uh, being a nobody to actually being able to be somebody in this community. I got involved with student government. I became a varsity soccer player and varsity basketball player. So it was kind of an interesting transition. Uh, I went to college and I drank. I drank occasionally. I never got in real big trouble drinking at this point. I got to college and I did really well in college. I had a great time. I did everything except go to classes. So I didn't do very well. Uh, I get home. I came back. I came out of school my first semester. I got a 1.25, two Fs, and a B and a C. My second semester, I did a little bit better, but I was on probation. And so I went back the second year, and I was pretty much excited to get back and do it right. I was very involved. I was on a school newspaper, I was on a school radio station, I was freshman class president. I just really had a great time. Drinking was not part of the story then. Uh, my second year, I was got a job on campus, and I was washing dishes. And I was coming out of the dishwashing assignment one night, and the guy says, "You know anything about proof of age?" I said, "Yeah, I know all about it." He goes, "Well, go get dressed and report to the pub." Well, as a result of just, serendipity, I got the best job on campus. I was a bouncer at the college pub, and the college pub was the center of social life on campus, and it also was the center of social life in that part of Buffalo. We used to have a band every Fridays and Saturday nights, and we would have bands come in, and we would arrange for auditions. People would hire them for other jobs. So we really had a phenomenal process. Unfortunately, part of the job, what's the right word? Benefits is I could drink free anytime I wanted. So what happened there was I started to drink, and I was drunk every day. And I think that was the beginning of my alcoholism. I got to November, and I realized that I was not instead of being involved in everything, I was involved in drinking. And I realized I was not going to do well. So I got involved with what was the first of my geographic cures. And I quit school in November, and I went home, and I got a job on Wall Street in New York City. And I'm 19 years old. I have my own apartment in New York City, and I've got a job on Wall Street. And it was going from the frying pan into the fire. The guys I worked with were all World War II veterans, and they had major drinking issues. So, needless to say, I was their mascot, and I would be sitting in the office working, and I would get a call, "Please deliver something to, 1742 Maiden Lane." And 1742 Maiden Lane was the Killarney Rose, and they would have me drunk by 3 o'clock. So I was drunk every day. And I think that's really where my disease took over. Uh, Interestingly enough, I knew that I couldn't maintain this. So I said, well, you know what? Let me quit, and I'll go back to college, and I'll do it right this time. And I got back to school, and I got hired again to be a bouncer in the pub. And I was told, don't let what happened to you happen this year, and you'll be manager of the pub. And the manager of the pub was like one of the best jobs in the world. But the truth of the matter was free booze and free booze all the time. I was out of there again by November. I came home, and this time I stayed at my parents' house. Uh, I ended up going to work for the electric company. And for the first month at the electric company, I was on a crew that there was no drinking, and everything was fine. And then I ended up getting on the digger crew. And the digger crew was a drinking crew. And uh, we were drunk every day. We'd work hard in the morning, and then we'd drink all afternoon. Again, it just seemed like every place I went, it was available. Now, whether or not it was just I made it available or not, I'm not sure, but it certainly was there. My boss on that crew was drunk at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he drank all day. But anyway, uh, so I got off that crew. I became a meter reader, and then I got involved in line school. I was going to learn how to climb poles. And I don't know if any of you ever been a lineman, but I was okay climbing 45 feet. I had no problem with that. But what they told me was that when part of my next part of the job was I'd have to get out of a bucket truck at 95 feet and jump onto a pole. That was not going to happen. So I enlisted in the United States Army, another geographic cure. And that worked out pretty well. I went to the army the first day. I was so hungover. I was in absolute pain. Uh, so I was, yeah, as Arlo Guthrie said, looking and feeling my best. But an interesting thing happened. We weren't allowed to drink or do drugs. Never do drugs, but we weren't allowed to drink during basic training. And I ended up being the top soldier in my battalion in basic training. I was the top out of 600. And it was a very nice honor. My parents had driven down to South Carolina to see me graduate. And my father had people coming up to him, colonels, and telling him what a great soldier his son was. And it was kind of a high point in my military career. Because the next place I went was to El Paso, Texas. And you guys probably don't know about Coors beer, but in the old days, if you had a friend who went west of the Mississippi and they brought you back a six pack of Coors, that was golden. Well, I got to El Paso in 1974 and they had Coors beer on tap. So we had a choice. We could go eat hamburgers every day at lunch, or we could go have three 48-ounce Coors. So I was drunk every day at AIT too. I come home. I was being stationed in Germany. I ended up in Germany, and my first night in Germany, a kid comes up to me and he says, "Hey, rookie, split a half a you want to split a dime of hash?" So I figured, hey, I'll take $5 and make a friend. Uh, I don't see him for a couple hours, and finally I run into him. I said, "So where's this hash?" He goes, "Oh, it's underneath your pillow." And it was a chunk of hash I had never seen so big. And I said, "Well, when are we splitting this?" He goes, "Welcome to Germany, Rook. Hash is very cheap and pretty available." So anyway, German beer and hash for the next 18 months. Uh, I did pretty well. I was able to do my job in such a way that uh, it kept me out of jail because I was good at my job. But it really was just one big giant drunk. I look back at those times, and you're not supposed to regret the past, but I look back at those times, and it's like, why didn't I fill that loneliness with whatever? Because it was a very lonely time. The only women who were available were German women who were looking for a husband or people's wives who were looking for a good time. And I wasn't interested in a wife, and I certainly wasn't interested in adultery. Came home, and by this point, my alcoholism, I'm off the charts. I'm just drinking all the time, and I come home, I go back to work for the electric company, and I went to school days and I worked nights, and then I said I'm going back to Buffalo State because that had defeated me. And I get back to Buffalo State, and lo and behold, I've learned to play the game, and I learned to drink when I needed to drink, but study when I needed to study, and I did pretty well. I graduated with a degree, and then I got a free master's degree, and I was put in charge of the student union. Now, the student union was where they had all the parties, and I was in charge of the student union from 3 o'clock on. So if you wanted a party, I had to sign off on your party. And the price of me signing off was I got to drink free at your event and a t-shirt. I still have a bag of t-shirts upstairs from 1979 to 81. Anyway, uh, still drinking, but kind of doing it okay that I'm able to compartmentalize and drink. I was drinking alone, basically. Anyway, then I met a girl, and she was a drunkard's dream. She and I used to make White Russians, and we would sit in her apartment because she had an apartment on campus. I had an apartment on campus, and we would drink White Russians, and we had fun. But then we broke up, and one thing led to another. And one weekend, I got pretty drunk. I got very drunk, and I tried to get back with her, and I kept calling her. And at one point, I tried to get over to her apartment, and a friend of mine turned me away. And he's still my friend. Actually, I was just texting him, And he said, Mikey, I never saw you look so wild. And I don't know what I was going to do that night, but the fact that he sent me back to my apartment probably saved me from serious problems. But anyway, uh, I woke up the next morning and I knew that I needed something. So I got on the phone. They had general services in Buffalo, and I called up and I said, I have a drinking problem. I need help. Well, the guy says, I'll see you outside the campus at 6:30 tonight. I said, okay. So I ended up going to work that day. And boy, every boss I had something to say about my weekend because my weekend was wild. And apparently, uh, it was not the normal process they had for me. And I got yelled at all day, and I'm looking and feeling my best. And I'm sitting outside the campus at 6:30 at night. Nobody shows up. So I'm thinking, well, maybe he said 7:30. So I waited till 7:30. Nobody showed up. Interestingly enough, it was 45 years ago last week. So I go back to my room, my apartment on campus, and the way the campus is set up, I have a choice. I can go left and go into the bar, and I know that if I go in there and have a couple of beers, I'll feel better. But I think it's the first time that I recognized that my higher power pushed me the other way, and I just went back into my apartment, and I was shaken and not doing well. And next thing, the guy calls me up and said, I was doing a 12-step call, which I had no idea what that was. He goes, I will see you tomorrow night. So uh, the guy shows up the next night, and he shows up in a 50s muscle car. He looks like the Fonz on methamphetamines, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Tom. How you doing?" So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm a little getting a little arrogant at this point, and I'm saying to myself, I'm the assistant to the dean of students. Maybe I don't have a drinking problem. This is what drinking problems look like. Blah blah blah. Well, again, it was another wonderful thing that happened in my recovery in that he took me to a meeting that we used to call it the Robert Hall meetings. They were all dressed up. And I went to this meeting, and like the Bishop of Buffalo, the district attorney from Buffalo, all of these celebrities were at this meeting. So it allowed me to be a little humbled that if these people could have that kind of problem, maybe I did. Um, Tom was a really good sponsor. He was my first sponsor. It turned out that the meeting he would have taken me to the night before was the last house on the block, and it would have been all kind of homeless people. And maybe I think if I had gone to that meeting, I might have talked myself out of ever coming back. Again, higher power. So we go to a meeting. We go to a meeting the next night. I'm still saying hi. I'm Michael. After the fourth night, he picks me up. He goes, "Are you not sure you're an alcoholic?" I said, "Well, I'm thinking about it." So he says, "Listen, let me ask you a question. Did you ever turn down sex to go drinking?" And I went, "Sure." Well, that was the first night I said, "Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic." My recovery was pretty good. I did a couple of years of pretty decent recovery. And then they call it California sobriety now, but I allowed marijuana to become part of my life. And interestingly enough, with the marijuana, is it activated all of my character defects. Everything came back full force. And I still had a career. I was doing pretty well. But all of a sudden, my attitudes and I just became a burden to the people I worked with. Uh, and I left that. And I came back home and I went to school and I got what I needed to become a teacher. And I was doing pretty well. But again, I was smoking pot and I was, the arrogance and the selfishness. And I I thought it was important that a principal knew what my opinion of her job was. Well, that didn't go over very well, and I had to leave that job. But I did get the job I really wanted. And anyway, it was a huge disappointment. And I didn't get the job I wanted. So anyway, I felt sorry for myself. I went on a little marijuana run And I'm in my parents' basement because I'm living at home. I'm 36 years old and I'm living in my parents' basement. And my little brother Dennis comes into me one night while I have my head in their stove, smoking a toilet paper pipe. And he says, "You know, Ed Hallisey says you're not really sober if you're smoking pot." And I turned to him and I said, "Well, why don't you tell Ed Hallisey to go F himself?" But something happened that night. I realized from my reaction that Ed Hallisey was telling the truth. And that was the last night I had regularly smoked marijuana. Uh, Shortly thereafter, I got a job in an alcohol and drug rehab. I did a solid 5 years of recovery. I met my wife. She worked there as well. Unfortunately, I suffer from depression, and I was on my way to the little place where the locks are on the other side of the door. And I said, let me smoke a joint. Maybe that'll get rid of my depression. By the way, that doesn't work. So I ended up being in this mental hospital, and an interesting, and then again, higher power. My godfather, who had seen me at my brother's wedding when I had about 10 days sobriety, and we had a meeting on the floor, came in and he offered an AA meeting for the people in, you know, locked up in the mental ward. So he was there, and I said, Billy, when we're done, I'd like you to take me through the steps. I'd like to do them again. So when he got out, when I got out, he was already out. We went through the steps, and I started my path of recovery. He we did the steps. We got to the last final step, and he says, I said, "So Billy, what's my sobriety date?" I said, "Is it 23 September of 80? Is it 1 March of 90?" He goes, He goes, "You know what? Pick a day last week." So I said, "Okay, how about July 4th?" And he goes, "No, you arrogant bastard. You can't have July 4th." So I picked July 3rd. And as it turned out, July 3rd works for me because some of you may or may not know, July 4th here is Independence Day. And one of the things I learned is that there is no independence without sobriety. So my sobriety date is the 3rd of July, 1995. I have not had a mood or mind altering substance since then. I attend meetings on a regular basis. I do service. I try to do my best to not say no. When Lily asked me, I was taken back. I had about 25 days in Buffalo, and they asked me to speak at a convention, and I said, I'm too new for this. And they said, okay, that's the last time you get to say no in AA. And I think maybe that it was the last time I said no in AA. So I try to have the steps in my life. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol or cocaine, but I'm powerless over a lot of things, and those things do make my life unmanageable. And I do my best not to have those involved in my life. Two, came to believe in a power greater than myself. Well, I was given a great gift at my second AA meeting. Apparently, I had a look, and a guy came up to me and he said, "Listen, don't worry about the God stuff." He goes, "Don't get in that God debate in your head. It'll happen to you when it happens." And he was right. That third step, made a decision to turn my will in my life. This is a step that I violate every day. Something comes up. The dog, I get angry at the dog, or something stupid comes up, and I kind of like give my sobriety away, sometimes for 30 seconds, sometimes for an hour. But I've got a program and I've got people in my life to get it back. 4 and 5, a lot of you guys are from someplace else. I guess where you're from, I'm from someplace else, but uh, 4 and 5, they scare people here. Oh, you've got to do your fourth and your fifth or you'll relapse and blah, 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 blah. I have a different take on that. I think 4 and 5 are the beginning of the forgiveness steps. I think that without 4 and 5, I can't learn to forgive. 6 and 7, defects and shortcomings. I'm still working on those. I find new ones all the time. It's really amazing. I've been doing this 30 years now, and I'll open up, I'll uncover a rock, and some really ugly stuff will climb out. and I have a sponsor, and I have places to work on that. 8 and 9, is making a list and checking it twice, see who's naughty and nice. And 9, making amends. Uh, I have a fun amends story. I was working at a high school, and we were playing the New York Football Giants in basketball, and there were 1,500 people in the stands. And this woman comes up to me while we're warming up, and she goes, "Are you Michael Hanrahan from Inwood?" Now, no good story ever starts out with, "Are you Michael Hanrahan from Inwood?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." She goes, "I was your prom date. My name is Kathy blank." And I went, "Oh my God, Kathy, that was 15 years ago, 16 years ago." She goes, "I've always wanted to apologize because I got drunk at her prom. I'd never dated her before or since. She had asked me to take her to a prom, and I did." And she goes, "Oh, I don't remember that. I remember not letting you kiss me on the Staten Island ferry." I said, "Oh, I remember that too." Anyway, her daughters were there, and her daughters were very excited to meet me as somebody who her mom, dated once. Her husband wasn't so excited, so we moved on. Anyway, 10 step, it's October, so we should be focusing on the 10 step. And my sponsor gave me a very interesting, 1, 4, and 5 equal 10. And that's basically what a 10 step is. He also told me I didn't have to wait till the end of the day to take care of my 10 step. And sometimes when I screw up now, I try to do my best. My wife and I had an interesting conversation yesterday, and I said to her, "I'm a much better apologizer now than I used to be." She goes, "Oh, yeah." Because I used to say things like, "Well, if I hurt your feelings," I was conditionally apologizing. 11, so, trying to get in touch with my higher power. I find my higher power in a lot of places. I find my higher power in meetings. Sometimes I find my higher power in conflict. And 12, I think everybody likes to tell what they know. So that part of this step isn't as important to me as the last 9 words, to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I think that's the mission of people in recovery, to practice these principles in all our affairs. Uh, I'm hoping this was good. It's interesting. Usually when you speak to an audience, there's feedback, and all I've got is silence. So I'm hoping that somebody got something out of this. I know I got something out of it because I get to share my story, and I sit there and I get to self-evaluate. I appreciate, Lily, you taking the time and asking me. And as John Lennon said, I hope I passed the audition. So God bless
Thank you, Mike.
all, and we'll do whatever we need to do next.